Tyrfing. Tyrfing is a cursed sword from Norse mythology, forged by the dwarf brothers Dvalinn and Durin under duress. According to the Hervarar saga, King Svafrlami forced these master craftsmen to create the weapon at sword point, and in revenge, they placed a terrible curse upon it. The blade possesses extraordinary properties that make it nearly invincible in battle. It never misses its target once drawn, never rusts or dulls, and can cut through iron and stone as easily as cloth. However, the curse demands a terrible price. Tyrfing must draw blood every time it's unsheathed, and cannot be returned to its scabbard until it has killed someone. The sword's golden hilt gleams with an unnatural light, even in complete darkness, marking it as a weapon of supernatural power. This curse proved catastrophic for every wielder, beginning with Svafrlami himself, who died by the blade he commissioned. The weapon passed through multiple generations, including the legendary shield maiden Hervarar, who retrieved it from her father's burial mound despite the grave's guardian warnings. Each owner gained unmatched prowess in combat, but ultimately suffered doom, as the sword brought destruction not only to its wielder, but to their entire family line, embodying the Norse concept that even the greatest power comes with unbearable cost. Dain's life, whose name means Dain's legacy, is another dwarf-forged cursed sword that plays a central role in one of Norse mythology's most haunting tales, created by the dwarf Dain. This weapon shines with a brilliance like sunlight and possesses properties that make it absolutely lethal. It never fails to kill when drawn from its sheath, and wounds inflicted by its blade never heal, condemning victims to slow, inevitable death. The sword's most famous wielder was King Hergni, who used it in the legendary Hjadningavig, the Battle of the Hudnings, which became cursed to repeat for eternity. According to the Prose Edda's Skaldskaparmal section, the battle began over a woman and escalated into a conflict that could never end. Each night, the goddess Freya's servant Hildur would use her magic to resurrect all the fallen warriors, and each dawn they would rise and fight again with the same fury. King Hygni's use of Dain's life in this endless battle meant that warriors suffered wounds that could never properly heal, yet they were compelled to fight through the pain eternally. This cycle, according to tradition, will continue until Ragnarök finally breaks all curses and ends the world. The sword represents the Norse understanding of how violence perpetuates itself, and how oaths and feuds, once begun, can trap generations in unbreakable cycles of bloodshed and suffering. Gram, also known as Balmung in Germanic tradition, is perhaps the most celebrated hero's sword in Norse mythology, forever linked with Sigurd the Dragon Slayer. According to the Volsunga saga, the weapon was originally forged by Waylon the Smith, known in Old Norse as Völundr, the greatest craftsman in all the mythological worlds. The sword's legend begins when the god Odin himself embedded it in the branstock tree during a feast, declaring that whoever could draw it out would own the finest blade ever made. Only Sigurd's father Sigmund proved worthy, pulling Gram free and wielding it in countless battles until his final fight, where Odin appeared and shattered the blade with his spear, deciding Sigmund's fate had come. Sigurd's mother Hjördis carefully preserved the broken pieces, and when Sigurd came of age, the smith Regan reforged them into a weapon even more powerful than before. To test the reborn blade's sharpness, Sigurd first struck an anvil and cut clean through it, then threw a tuft of wool into a flowing river and held Gram's edge in the current. The wool drifted into the blade and was sliced in two. With this perfected weapon, Sigurd dug a pit beneath the path of the dragon Fafnir and stabbed upward into the beast's soft underbelly as it crawled overhead, a deed that made him the greatest hero of the age. Skofnung. Skofnung was the legendary sword of King Rolf Kraki of Denmark, and according to the Cormac saga, it was considered the hardest and sharpest blade in all of existence. Unlike many cursed weapons in Norse tradition, Skofnung was not inherently malevolent, but it demanded strict adherence to specific rituals and prohibitions that governed its use. The sword possessed extraordinary supernatural properties. It contained the souls of King Rolf's 12 elite berserker bodyguards, giving it tremendous battle fury and strength beyond any normal weapon. Wounds inflicted by Skofnung could only be healed by the Skofnung stone, a separate magical object that accompanied the blade, and without this stone, injuries from the sword would never properly mend. The weapon had rigid rules for its drawing. It must never be unsheathed in the presence of women, sunlight must never touch its hilt, and specific rituals had to be performed before taking it into battle. Those who heard the blade described it as humming or singing softly before combat, the voices of the 12 berserkers contained within it. After King Hrolf Kraki's death, the sword was buried with him in his mound, but it was later stolen by a man named Skeggi, who sought its power. Tragically, the Skofnung stone became separated from the sword and was lost to history, meaning the knowledge of how to heal its wounds disappeared forever, leaving only the weapon's lethal power without its merciful counterpart. Freyr's self-fighting sword. Freyr, the Vanir god of fertility, peace, and prosperity, once owned the most remarkable weapon in Asgard, a sword that required no wielder and could fight entirely of its own accord. According to the Skirnismal from the Poetic Edda, this sentient blade possessed tactical intelligence and perfect martial skill, moving through the air with fluid grace and defeating any enemy it faced without a hand to guide it. The weapon shone with a brilliance like the sun and represented the height of magical craftsmanship, though its creator is not specified in the surviving sources. Freyr's story takes a tragic turn when he glimpses the beautiful giantess Gerdur from Odin's high seat and falls desperately in love with her. He sends his servant Skirnir to Jotunheim to win her hand. But Gerdur refuses all gifts of golden apples and magic rings. Only when Skirnir threatens her with Freyr's self-fighting sword, describing the curse and doom it could bring, does she finally agree to the marriage. To complete the transaction, Freyr gives his greatest weapon to Skirnir permanently, leaving himself defenseless. This decision proves catastrophic at Ragnarok when Freyr must face the fire giant Surtur in single combat. Without his sword, the god of peace is forced to fight using only a stag's antler, and Surtur kills him before setting the entire world ablaze. Freyr's sacrifice of ultimate power for love demonstrates the Norse understanding that even gods must live with the consequences of their choices, and that personal desire can reshape cosmic destiny. Hufud, whose name simply means head in Old Norse, is the sword wielded by Heimdall, the watchman of the gods and eternal guardian of the Rainbow Bridge Bifrost. Though less celebrated in surviving sources than Heimdall's famous horn Gjallarhorn, which he will blow to signal the beginning of Ragnarok, his sword plays a crucial role in the final moments of Norse mythology. Heimdall himself is among the most vigilant beings in existence, requiring less sleep than a bird, possessing eyesight so sharp he can see for hundreds of miles day or night, and hearing so acute he can detect grass growing on the earth and wool growing on sheep's backs. He stands constant watch at the edge of Asgard, ready to defend the gods against any threat. According to the prose Edda's Gylfaginning, when Ragnarok finally arrives and the forces of chaos storm Asgard, Heimdall raises Gjallarhorn and sounds the alarm that echoes across all 9 realms. In the catastrophic battle that follows, Heimdall confronts his ancient enemy Loki in single combat, and the two engage in a duel that has been fated since the beginning of time. Using Hofud, Heimdall strikes down the trickster god, but Loki delivers a fatal blow in return, and both die together, their mutual destruction symbolizing the end of old enmities as the world itself burns. Their deaths represent the Watchman's duty fulfilled unto the very last moment, proving that some conflicts end only when everything ends. Mistletoe. Mistletoe is a name that appears attached to multiple legendary weapons across various Norse sagas, creating scholarly debate about whether these references describe a single blade or whether the name itself became a title of power that multiple heroes claimed for their weapons. The name translates to mistletoe, immediately connecting it to one of Norse mythology's most tragic moments, the death of Baldur, the beloved god who was killed by a dart made of mistletoe, the only substance in all creation that his mother Frigg had failed to extract an oath from when she sought to make her son invulnerable. The most detailed account of a weapon called Mistletoe comes from the Hrolmundar saga Gripsonar, where it appears as a sword of extraordinary power that glows with pale light and darkness and cannot be broken by any force. Some sources describe it as self-sharpening, never dulling, no matter how many battles it endures. The symbolic weight of naming a weapon after mistletoe is profound in Norse culture, as it represents the one vulnerability that could harm the invulnerable, the single weakness that undermines perfect protection, and the instrument of betrayal that Loki used to orchestrate the most devastating loss the gods ever suffered. That multiple heroes across different sagas claimed weapons bearing this name suggests that Misteltein became legendary enough that possessing a blade called by this title conferred status and respect, much as medieval European knights might name their swords after Excalibur, showing how one tragic moment can echo through an entire culture's martial traditions. Leviatine. Leviatine is among the most mysterious and debated weapons in Norse mythology, mentioned only in the Eddic poem to Fjolsvinnsmal, where even its basic nature remains unclear to modern scholars. The name is generally interpreted to mean either damage twig or wounding wand, but whether this describes a sword, a staff, a wand, or some other form of weapon entirely is a matter of ongoing scholarly discussion. According to the poem, this enigmatic weapon was crafted by Loki, though some interpretations suggest the smith Falundr may have been its creator, and it is kept locked away in a chest, secured with 9 locks beneath the gates of death itself. The fearsome giantess Sinmara guards this chest, and she will surrender Leviathan only to someone who brings her the tail feathers of Vidopnir, a golden rooster that sits atop the highest branches of the world tree Yggdrasil. The circular nature of this quest, where obtaining the weapon requires first capturing something equally difficult to reach, suggests that Leviathan possesses immense power that must be kept from mortal and divine hands alike. The poem indicates that Leviathan is the only weapon capable of killing Vidopnir, creating an impossible paradox where the thing needed to complete the quest is the very reward of the quest itself. This riddle-like structure reflects the Norse love of complex puzzles and demonstrates how mythology sometimes preserves mysteries intentionally, leaving later generations to wonder about weapons and powers that remained locked away, their true nature known only to those who guarded them in the Age of Gods. Gungnir. Gungnir is the legendary spear of Odin, the All-Father and King of the Aesir, and it stands as one of the 2 most famous weapons in all of Norse mythology, rivaled only by Thor's hammer Mjolnir. According to the prose Edda's Skaldskaparmal, the spear was forged by the sons of Ivaldi, a group of dwarf craftsmen of extraordinary skill who also created Freyr's magical ship Skidbladnir and the golden hair that replaced what Loki had maliciously cut from the goddess Sif. The weapon possesses properties that make it the perfect instrument of divine authority. Once thrown, it never misses its target regardless of the thrower's skill, and it always returns to Odin's hand like a falcon returning to its master. The shaft was carved from wood taken from Yggdrasil, the world tree itself, and runes of power were inscribed along its length, making the spear unbreakable by any force in the 9 realms. Odin used Gungnir to declare the beginning of wars, hurling it over the assembled armies of his enemies while shouting, "Odin owns you all," a ritual that Vikings later imitated in actual historical battles. The spear also played a role in Odin's greatest sacrifice. When he hung himself from Yggdrasil for 9 days and nights to gain knowledge of the runes, he pierced his own side with Gungnir, offering himself to himself in a shamanic ordeal that brought cosmic wisdom. Yet even this perfect weapon cannot alter fate. At Ragnarok, Odin wields Gungnir against the monstrous wolf Fenrir, but despite the spear's power, the wolf devours the All-Father, proving that destiny overcomes even divine authority. Mjolnir. Mjolnir, the hammer of Thor, god of thunder, is the most iconic weapon in Norse mythology and has become the enduring symbol of Norse paganism itself, recognized across cultures even today. According to the prose Edda's Skaldskaparmal, the hammer was forged by the dwarf brothers Brock and Eitri, also called Sindri, during a legendary crafting competition against the sons of Ivaldi. Loki had wagered his own head with Brock that the brothers could not create treasures to surpass those already made, and during the forging, the trickster god transformed himself into a fly and bit Brock on the eyelid at the crucial moment, causing the dwarf to pause and resulting in the hammer's handle being shorter than originally intended. Despite this flaw, when the gods judged the treasures, they declared Mjolnir the finest creation ever made because of its devastating power and perfect reliability. The hammer possesses extraordinary properties. It always returns to Thor's hand after being thrown. It creates lightning and thunder with each strike. It can level mountains and shatter giant skulls with single blows, and it is so heavy that only Thor can lift it, requiring him to wear special iron gloves, called Jarngripr and a strength-doubling belt called Megingjord to wield it properly. Thor uses Mjolnir to protect both Asgard and Midgard from the constant threat of giants, and the weapon serves purposes beyond war. It consecrates marriages, blesses births, and can even resurrect Thor's slain goats by passing over their remains. At Ragnarok, Thor wields Mjolnir against his ancient enemy, the world serpent Jormungandr, and succeeds in killing the monster, but he dies from its poison after taking only 9 steps. The hammer still in his grip as he falls, proving that even the mightiest weapon cannot prevent the fated end. Surtur's sword. Surtur's flaming sword represents the ultimate expression of destructive power in Norse mythology, a weapon destined to burn the entire world when Ragnarok finally arrives, reducing all 9 realms to ash and making way for the cycle of rebirth. Surtur himself is a primordial fire giant who has guarded the realm of Muspelheim, the land of elemental fire, since before the gods themselves came into existence, making him older than the ordered cosmos and a living embodiment of the chaos that preceded creation. According to the Völuspá from the Poetic Edda and the Gylfaginning section of the Prose Edda, when the final battle begins, Surtur will lead the sons of Muspel, the fire giants, across the rainbow bridge Bifrost, which will shatter under their weight and fury. He engages the god Freyr in single combat, and because Freyr foolishly gave away his self-fighting sword to win the hand of the giantess Gyrdir, the god of fertility must fight with only a stag's antler as his weapon. Surtur's blade, which blazes with flames brighter than the sun itself, makes short work of the unarmed god, and after this victory, the fire giant uses his sword to set all of creation ablaze. The flames consume the forests, boil the oceans, burn through the roots and branches of Yggdrasil, the world tree, and reduce gods, giants, humans, and dwarves alike to nothing. Some scholars have debated whether Surtur's sword is the same weapon as the mysterious Levitine mentioned earlier in mythology, but the sources do not provide a definitive answer. What remains certain is that this flaming blade represents the inevitable return of primordial chaos, the fire that cleanses the old world so a new one can emerge from the ashes, embodying the Norse belief in cosmic cycles where destruction and creation are forever intertwined. Angrvatl. Angrvatl, whose name translates to Stream of Anguish, is the legendary sword of Frithjof the Bold, a hero from the Frithjof saga Insfrykna, one of the Icelandic romance sagas that blend Norse mythological elements with medieval storytelling traditions. While this places Angrvatl in a slightly different literary category than the weapons from the older Eddic sources, it remains firmly rooted in Norse weapon traditions and showcases the continuing cultural importance of legendary blades. The sword was given to Frithjof by his father Thorstein as an inheritance, and according to the saga, it possesses remarkable properties that distinguish it from other legendary weapons. It shines with a light so brilliant that it outshines the sun itself, and its blade is adorned with runes that burn even brighter in darkness or during battle. The weapon was reportedly tempered in dragon's blood, a process that made it eternally sharp, never requiring a whetstone no matter how many enemies it cut down. In one famous scene from the saga, Frithjof enters a dark hall, and Angrvatl's radiance illuminates the entire space more effectively than any torch or fire could, the runes along its length blazing like embers and casting dancing shadows on the walls. The emphasis on light rather than pure destructive capability sets Angrvatl apart from the cursed blades like Tyrfing or Dainsleif. The sword's brilliance becomes a symbol of its wielder's heroic virtue and noble character. The runes inscribed on the blade were said to contain prophecies and ancient wisdom, making the weapon not just a tool of war, but a bearer of knowledge across generations. As a cherished heirloom passed from father to son, Angrvatl represents the Norse cultural values of family legacy, inherited honor, and the belief that truly great weapons embody the spirit of those who wielded them. If you want to see more, click the video on screen now.